day away from Friday. Awesome, and we're delivering a brand new edition of CNN 10. I'm Carl Azus, happy to have you with us. International tensions over an international nuclear deal are our first subject today. The Middle Eastern country of Iran has a nuclear program that other countries want to stop. Iran has said its nuclear research is for peaceful purposes, like electricity. The United States and several other countries around the world don't think that's the truth. They're concerned Iran is using its technology to try to build a nuclear weapon. Over the years, there have been a number of efforts to pressure the Middle Eastern country to stop its nuclear program. The United States imposed sanctions, penalties on Iran's economy to try to get the country to change course. But in 2015, the U.S. led 6 other nations in a controversial agreement with Iran. These countries removed their economic sanctions, allowing tens of billions of dollars to flow into Iran, and in exchange, that country agreed to limit its nuclear program for 15 years and allow international inspectors to verify it was living up to its promise. At the time, the U.S. government was led by President Barack Obama. His administration said the deal was the best way to prevent Iran from building nuclear weapons. Critics called it a bad deal, saying it didn't go far enough because Iran would eventually build them anyway. One of those critics was America's next president, Donald Trump. He announced in 2018 that the U.S. was leaving the agreement and reinstating its economic penalties on Iran. At first, the Middle Eastern country said it would honor its commitment to the deal with the 5 other nations involved. But in recent years, Iran has not been doing that. And it said this week it would no longer cooperate with certain inspections of its nuclear facilities. However, Iran also suggested its decision could be changed if the United States once again removes its sanctions on the Middle Eastern country. Analysts say this is all meant to put pressure on the Biden administration. President Joe Biden, who was vice president under Barack Obama, wants to restart negotiations with Iran. And while the U.S. and Iran have both said it's up to the other country to make the first move, the Biden administration suggested last week that it is open to holding talks with Iran even before any changes are made. 10-second trivia. What is the only active volcano on the European mainland? Mount Merapi, Mount Elbrus, Mount Etna, or Mount Vesuvius? The words active and mainland are key here, and the only one is Italy's Mount Vesuvius. Some of the unusual side effects of the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdowns related to it include the infamous toilet paper shortages of 2020. There's been a worldwide bike shortage with demand through the roof after gyms closed and people looked to get outside for exercise. In the animal kingdom, when Yosemite National Park closed last year, bears were sighted walking down a road that was usually packed with tourists in their cars. Without people on the beach in Thailand and Florida, larger numbers of sea turtles were spotted. Foxes on a boardwalk in Toronto, Canada. Lions taking a catnap on a South African road. The list goes on and on. And unfortunately, in the capital of the United Kingdom, it includes a proliferation of rats. And they're not just in the historic parts of London.
They're in the parks, up the pipes, and heading towards a kitchen near you. Lockdown London has become a boom town for the capital's rats. Left unchecked in shuttered shops and restaurants over the winter, and now making their way out of the inner city and into the suburbs.
Look at this rat trying to get into the house.
According to the British Pest Control Association, rodent sightings increased 51% during the first lockdown and 78% thereafter. prompting fears the UK capital could soon become famous for the super rats that once blighted Paris and New York.
So underneath there, there'll be a sump drain.
Right, like a hole?
It's a hole, yeah.
To let water out?
Exactly. If it's screwed out, because people get lazy, because they won't do it, and the rats will come up. Yeah.
To avoid that, the city needs prevention like this. It's just before daybreak on the banks of the River Thames, and former soldier Michael Coates is patrolling the refuse sites, looking for the telltale signs.
And what you can also find, especially in heavy populations of rats, they'll start gnawing, and this plastic's really easy for rats to gnaw.
Fewer people on the streets has made rats more conspicuous.
Do you ever see rats?
I've seen one, only a little one. Rats and pigeons and everything, yeah.
So you think there probably is something in that?
There'll be definitely stuff in here, yeah. Oh, definitely.
And more abundant waste from lockdown homes has lured them to backyards.
We're certainly seeing now a spike in rats migrating back into people's gardens. Beginning of last year, we got a really bad case in someone's garden. She was an elderly lady, and she'd seen a few rats, and by the time we'd got there was maybe 10 or 15 rats, and it'd become this really big issue.
Rats have always been a part of London life, but nobody really knows how many there are in the capital. That's because usually they're pretty elusive. They do, however, outnumber the human population, and they multiply really fast. Just one pair of breeding rats can give rise to 1,250 in 1 year. As their population swells, rats themselves are getting bigger and harder to catch. Some are immune to poison, others have figured out how to avoid traps. Exterminator Paul Claydon has never been so busy.
I would say probably call-outs has increased around about 50% for me.
Do you think that when London eventually reopens, they're going to realise they've got one big rat problem?
I think that's right, and I think a lot of commercial businesses have been empty for so long. I think when they start going back to these properties, and certainly businesses that haven't got pest control contracts involved, they might find themselves going to have a big surprise.
The Mayor's office doesn't have a rodent plan, and many local governments don't offer free pest control either, meaning businesses and homeowners are often left to their own devices to deal with their new post-pandemic neighbours. Nina Dos Santos, CNN, London.
It can be said that desserts, like the meals that precede them, have different levels of culinary constitution. You have your basics, like cookies, cupcakes, ice cream, and then you've got your gourmet goodies, like tiramisu, apple crumble, and Oreo ice cream pie. Now, we're not saying any one of these is better than any other, but some pastry chefs in Denver are blending the basics with the gourmet, and the result is high interest, if not low calorie.
It was really a challenge at first trying to figure out how we were going to turn a cookie that's already made into an ingredient for another dessert. Felt like I was kind of on one of those cooking competitions where it was like, okay, here's your cookie, now go!
It might drive health nuts, and people who panna cotta avoid sweets, they might find just the sight of all that pure torture. But for others, getting from gourmet to be is a moose. They're not putting up with anything they can't cobbler up. They relish a clear choice when it comes to their just desserts to pick something flantastic, and that takes the cake. Shout out today goes out to Coral Reef High School, our viewers watching in Richmond Heights, Florida. For CNN 10, I'm Carl Azus.